C.S. Lewis distinguishes agape love from three other Greek words for love, one based on need, one based on friendship, and one based on erotic attraction. But all of these can, in the right setting, be raised and issue forth into agape, which is the love that is associated in the New Testament with God, the highest and most fulfilling love, which Jesus in John directly associates with such sayings as eternal, indestructible life and living life abundantly and joyfully and boldly. All other forms of love can be transformed into agape through grace. Agape love is a very nuanced love and can have many expressions. For example, in the book of Joy, Lasting Happiness in a Changing World, Richard Branson captures a moment of agape which has become iconic for me of this tender divine love. The scene is the reuniting of two old friends and revered religious leaders, Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama, two men who have faced tremendous suffering in their lives, things that would make us extremely fearful, but who nevertheless radiate that incredible love and joy. And Branson says this: "When we arrived at the airport in Dharamsala, the Dalai Lama was standing under a yellow umbrella, eagerly awaiting the one whom he calls his mischievous spiritual brother." I love that. After they bowed to each other in traditional Tibetan style, the Archbishop touched the Dalai Lama's cheeks as tenderly as one might one's grandchild, and then the Archbishop kissed the Dalai Lama on the cheek. The Dalai Lama laughed with surprise and delight. Whisked away from his family at the age of 2 and raised up to a vaunted status far from the realm of kisses, the Dalai Lama had never been kissed before and was not accustomed to it. "Greet one another with a holy kiss," writes the Apostle Paul in his first letter to the Thessalonians and his letter to the Romans. "Greet the brothers and sisters with a kiss of agape love," writes the author of 1 Peter. Agape is a love that engages our higher self, our beliefs and choices and awareness. Agape also has a sense of joy and affection, as when we're losing ourselves, doing something that engages our creativity or concern for the welfare of another, or moves us to acts of extraordinary generosity beyond what we could imagine. Agape moves us to do with less time, less money, less leisure, less commerce, even less safety, so others may have more food, more justice, more human dignity, more kindness, more respect, more compassion. Agape love, this divine love, works like a healing salve. And it's interesting because the root of salve is the same root as the word salvation. And we think of salvation as other things, but salvation is healing. Salvation is coming to wholeness. And so agape love works like a healing salve for both the one who is moved by it and the one who receives its grace. And the Bible is clear that agape love is an antidote to the toxic and poisonous anxiety which moves us to circle the wagons and hold tightly to what we have, to stay close to home and to our type, Anxiety in its more extreme forms breaks out into violence and xenophobia, causes us to see others as depriving us, threatening limited resources rather than neighbors, to be discovered and welcomed, enjoyed and loved. Agape love is a love that comes as divine gift from the tender heart of God, the tender heart of the Holy Trinity, which is so full of it that it spills out and embraces us all. And Paul is clear in his letter to the quarrelsome, divided, and judgmental church at Corinth that whatever is not grounded in this agape love is ultimately empty, ineffective, and not of God. Paul goes on to describe in detail some of the essential marks of this agape love in 1 Corinthians 13, where he says it's patient and kind and not envious, boastful, arrogant, rude, or insistent on its own way, or irritable or resentful. Words that we all love and find so difficult to follow. Words and descriptions that we seem to have lost in our culture and world. Scott Bader Say, in his recent talk at our diocesan council, makes the bold statement that this tender agape love is what ultimately distinguishes Christianity from every other religion. Other religions have it, but the making it a focal point is what distinguishes Christianity. Well, Friday evening, Kathy and I and Melissa and Brian Deutsch had an experience of this kind of love. We were invited to eat at the home of a Turkish couple. The husband had been working in the United States when the coup happened in Turkey, and although he had nothing to do with it, his position in the U.S. made him vulnerable to being jailed back in Turkey. So in an instant, in 30 minutes, he and his family lost everything. They had nothing, no place to live, no health care, no income, no country. But friends and neighbors came to their rescue, loving them, helping them find work, making sure they weren't lonesome, loaning them a house to live in, helping them get their daughter back from Turkey, where she was threatened. And now, as we came into their house, they were set on loving in return. It was obvious that the man and woman had cooked all day and given great thought and love to the preparation of the meal. Sitting down to dinner, we were treated to at least 7 or 8 serving dishes brimming with the most wonderful things, and we ate our fill. And finally, when we were about to push our chairs away from the table, thinking we could not eat another thing, they announced, "Now it's time for the main course." And as we rolled out the door later on, we realized that in the midst of their trauma, they were loved with this agape love. The love and generosity they experienced from their friends and comrades here prevented a traumatic loss from becoming the seedbed of anger, resentment, and bitterness. Quite the contrary. That love became an antidote to that poison. Raised up for them, they began to see and experience a generosity they could never have fathomed. And rather than becoming bitter, they wanted to love in return. For that love took root and grew and spilled over into a great feast, a feast beyond our imagination, a sort of Eucharistic feast in which we experienced a Holy Communion across lines of language and culture and religion. Well, I've been thinking since then, isn't this what church is about in the final analysis? A place so full of this tender, transforming agape love that is overwhelming, that heals fear, that transforms trauma and cannot be contained, but like that love of the Holy Trinity must of necessity be held up and spill out into community beyond the doors. Proclaiming in a word that finds expression in acts that God did not send his Son to condemn, but to bring that healing salve to save lives from bitterness and hatred, anger and violence, to save lives that they might spill out in love for still others. Amen.